Hey guys, how are you? Welcome to interview question number 10. What I want to do today is talk about the difference between pull and fetch. So what is the difference between a get pull and a get fetch? The first thing I want to do here is talk about what a repository is. Now, a repository is basically a location where data is stored and managed. Another thing is that when it comes to working with repositories, it's mainly used for collaboration. And if you're currently in college or you've worked within the workplace on some type of application, then I'm sure you've worked with some type of repository. Now, the reason that repositories are used for collaborations is because when you're working in the workplace, you're working with a very large application, and it's very difficult for just one person to complete that application. So, in order to make sure that the application is done within a reasonable amount of time, there are a lot of people who need to be working on this application at the same time in order to make sure that you're making significant progress. Another reason why we use repositories is because of organization. We want to make sure that each one of the files that we check into the repository or that we're dealing with within our application are checked in an organized type of way. We don't want any one's changes conflicting with another person's changes, and that's where repositories come in and solve that problem. Now, you may have worked with a variety of repositories such as GitHub, Subversion, or ClearCase. What I'm going to do is kind of focus on GitHub right now because we're mainly going to be dealing with the fetch and the pull functions in GitHub. But right here on this line, I just wanted to show you some of the different functions that are used in GitHub: the get status, the get fetch, get pull, clone, and commit. But we're pretty much, as I said before, going to just primarily focus on get fetch and get pull. Okay, so get fetch versus get pull. All right, so when you're working with a get fetch, that basically means that you're going to update your local repository data. So if you've ever worked with GitHub, when you go to GitHub, the first thing you need to do is create a repository. And once you create that repository will be named your remote repository. And there's another repository that you have to create after that called a local repository, which is a repository located on your local computer, which reaches out to the remote repository to update information. Now, another thing I want to talk about is the get pull, which is basically going to be used to perform a fetch and is going to merge that data to your local branch. And I think this picture is pretty much going to make it a whole lot clearer. All right, so we have this picture here. You have your workspace, which is the application that you're going to be working with. And basically, this is our remote repository here. This is our local repository, which is a repository that we create on our own computer. And this local repository is pretty much used to bridge a connection between your local workspace and the remote repository, which is pretty much the repository that you have created on GitHub. Now, to explain these two a little bit more clear, the get fetch and get pull, let's make our way through this picture that I have here. So if you're performing a get fetch, basically you're just updating your local repository with what's in your remote repository. So let's just say there are multiple other developers who are making changes to this remote repository by pushing data to it, and you don't have the latest changes here in your local repository. So simply you would just run the command get fetch, which would update this local repository with what's in your remote repository here. But the get pull actually performs a fetch and it merges the data to your local branch. So this get pull right here is actually going to take all the information from the remote repository. It's going to update your repository, and it's going to merge all that information to your local branch so that you have the most updated changes that you can work with. That's pretty much it when it comes down to it. This picture pretty much explains it very well, and it pretty much gives you full insight on what actually goes on between get pull and a get fetch. So if you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below. Don't forget to like the video if you felt like you've learned something here, and until next time.